Hello. Today we're going to take a look at getting started with Google Sheets. We're going to look at how to create a Google Sheet, how to name it, the basic layout of the screen, the menu systems and how they work. So let's get started. The best way to do this is to come into your Google Drive, click the New button in the upper left corner, find Google Sheets and select that. Okay, you may notice right off that Google Sheets looks an awful lot like Microsoft Excel with a couple of minor differences. One, you only start with one sheet instead of multiple sheets. Now in earlier versions of Excel you usually started with 3, but you can always create more as you need, so that's a minor thing. The other thing is you start out with fewer columns. You only have 7 columns, and if you were to scroll to the bottom you'd find you only have 1,000 rows, which for most activities is more than enough. Now that doesn't mean you're limited to these. You can always create more, but in Excel you've kind of got this never-ending row thing. It goes down into the 60,000s, etc. So minor differences. Third major difference is that the menu system works a little differently. In Excel or all Microsoft products, you have your main menu, but when you click on a main menu item, what they call the ribbon or the most common tools for that menu item appear. Now Google is different in that we do have our main menu items here, and they've also collected the most commonly used tools to this bar, but this is not context sensitive. In other words, it doesn't change by menu. So there are overall fewer options, but you will find that they are the most commonly used options, so it is handy in that way. And if you need something more, you may have to go into the main menu item itself. Okay, let's take a look at how the screen itself is laid out. In the upper left hand corner you're going to find an icon, and if you click on this it's going to take you directly to the Google Sheets section. Now I wouldn't recommend working here. The only time you would ever really come here is if you had saved some templates in the template gallery and you wanted to retrieve them for further use. So I'm just going to close this sheet out now. It won't be saved because I didn't add anything to this sheet. As soon as I hit a keystroke on it, it's going to save. So another thing that you should know about Sheets is that, or any Google Doc type of file that you want to work with, is that if you want that to be in a certain location, the easiest thing to do is to navigate your way to that location before you start. Now you can always move it if you forget, so it's not a big deal, but it's just more convenient if you start thinking about your organizational structure. So, I would go into this particular class, and here we are at week 1, and this is where I'm keeping my week 1 stuff, and this is week 1 activities. So once I'm in there, I'll create my Google Sheet. Great. Next on the layout is the name. Now you can use the File menu to name it, but probably the handiest way is just to click in that box. And give it a good name there. If you ever want to change that, you simply come in here and you click and you edit it. It's that simple. This area will tell you when your changes are saved, so you just have to pause for a second or two until it says all changes saved in Drive, and then you can close it if you want. Okay, 2 little icons here. One is to star it. This is just a way to organize your files in Google Drive, so you can do that here. The second is a move to, and that you can also get from the File menu. But basically, if you didn't put it in the right location, you can use that now to navigate your way through your drive. So now I'm back at the classroom folder, and I want to come in here, and let's say I wanted to put it in week 10 instead. Well, then I could move it here. Now if I'm in week 10 and I want to create more structure, like I want to make a homework and a classwork and a resource folder in here, I can do that right on the fly with this particular button. So I can say demo. Demos. I click the check mark. There's now a demos folder inside there, and I can move the document into there. Okay, you have a short opportunity to undo it. but I'm going to dismiss that message because I'm happy with where it is. Okay, here is an icon to make comments. So if you were clicked on a particular space in the spreadsheet and you clicked on this, you could leave a comment associated with that. This is a share button. We've looked at permissions before in a different video, but this is how you access it. Your normal Google account, log in, log off. Down here you do have the Explore option, which isn't going to make a lot of sense in this blank sheet, but basically if you had some content selected, it would look at that, it would try to give you information about that, search the web for things that are related to that, etc. Down in the lower left you can see that we've got one sheet. If we were to right click on that, all the options for what we can do with this tab would be located there, duplicated, copy it, rename it, change its color, etc. We'll look at those in more detail later. And then the plus sign over here on the left allows you to add additional sheets. So if I click the plus, I now have a sheet 2. And that's the basic layout. Now, the work area itself is divided between columns, and the columns are labeled with letters. If we did go past letter Z, it would simply become AA, AB, AC, AD, and continue on in that fashion until we reach the end of our ability to create columns. And our rows are listed over on the left. Okay, down at the bottom, as we previously talked about, these are called sheets, and you can have multiple sheets in a file. In Microsoft Excel, they would call all of the sheets in that file altogether. That file would be a workbook. Google doesn't use that terminology, so you simply just have a series of sheets in the file. Okay, any particular space in here or particular location, you can see this location would be named D, since the column is named first, 4. So this spot is D4, and that spot is called a cell. So any of these little boxes are called cells. Okay, and then basically you just enter your data. So I can just type in here, if I wanted to do the months of the year, I could type in there, I could type numbers in there. Perhaps this is the low temperature for the month of February. That would be nice if it only got down to 19. But basically that's how it works. Now, as far as the menu system goes, a lot of this should look familiar with you. It's very common, a lot of very common terms here. The file menu has what you would expect underneath it: to make a new one, to open one, to make a copy of one. Sometimes that's called duplicate. So we'll look at these in more detail later. The edit menu has probably what you would expect: the undo and the redo, the cut, copy, and paste. With a spreadsheet, you're going to have a paste and a paste special, and we'll go into those in detail later. View, certain things you can see here, such as grid lines. I could turn those off and everything would be blank. But basically how you're going to look at the document when you're working with it. Insert, the number of things that you can put into a sheet. Format is going to be important. Basically, it's how you could bold, italicize, etc. Data is a tab that you don't have in something like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, so we will spend some time in this one. This is more specific to a spreadsheet. Here's where you can find some extra tools. Add-ons. Google makes their API or application programming interface available, and that's basically a doorway into their products. So the API for Google Sheets allows programmers to write programs that extend the functionality of the program. In other words, it does things that Google Sheets doesn't do natively, and they can use this API to add those. So at some point in the course we'll look at some add-ons, or at least where to find them. And add-ons are going to extend, let you do more with Google Sheets than you could do otherwise, and there's your help menu. Now, we're going to spend the remainder of this video simply looking at the most common tools. Okay, so the first is an undo button, and you can see if I mouse over it, it also says Control Z. That's the same as with most products. Control Z is the keyboard shortcut. You would hold down that CTRL key, tap Z, and you would go back to the last thing you did. So if I did that now, I'll do it with the menu, but Control Z is a little faster. Whoop! You can see it took away those grid lines. And if I do it again, they come back because this is where I started. And those are the last steps that I took. Here's a redo. So this is just moving you forward. So if I went back one too far, I went back one level too far and lost my 19, I can come forward and get it back by doing redo. Here's your print icon. This is a formatter, a paint formatter, and this is a super tool. So let's just say that I clicked on January and I'm playing with it to get it to look the way I want it to look. And I pick a font and I pick a color for that font, and I pick a background color for this cell, and I pick a font size here, make it a little more legible, and I center it, and we'll look at all these tools. So I do a bunch of things to this and it looks the way that I want it to look. If I click this painter and I click on another cell, it's going to pick up all of that formatting. So it can be a real time saver. Real time saver. Now I could have selected both of these, like I'll do this and I'll make them italics now. That would be one way to format things, so I could just select them and do them all at once. But then, if I add something or insert something or want to use that format somewhere else, I can always come back, click this formatter, and then click on the thing that I want to format. I'm going to use my undo because I don't want my number formatted that way. Okay, great. This is your view 100%, so you can knock it down to 90% if maybe you've got an extra column on the right that you want to see, or 75%. The lowest you can go is 50. So 50 shows you an awful lot of this sheet. If I tried to type in 40 up here, you'd see it defaults back to 50. However, if I try to type in 60, which is within the limits of the program, it will do that for me. So the lower limit is 40%, the upper limit is 200%, so that makes it very, very big. If I try to put in 210, it's going to go back to 200, but if I tried to put in 190, if I needed that for some reason, that would work. Okay, I'm going to double back to this little section of the toolbar in a couple of minutes. Let me go through some of the easy stuff first. This is how you choose a font. So here I'm going to choose impact so it matches this. Here's how you choose sizes. You'll notice that there are certain jumps or gradations, so it goes from 6 to 11, 12, but then jumps to 14, 18, 24. What if I wanted 22? I could do that. I just have to type it myself. So it gives you some common sizes. You can type the rest. Notice the biggest size here is 36. But if I type in 70, it will let me exceed that maximum here. Okay, whereas it didn't let me exceed the maximum or minimum in the view, it will for fonts. Font sizes anyway. Okay, if I want to bold something, so I've got a little bit of text here. I click on the cell. There I can bold it, I can italicize it, I can use a strike through. This is where I would change the color of it. This changes the color of the cell itself. This puts a border on the cell. And by the way, you can see that black border around the outside. You can adjust the thickness of that, you can adjust the color of that. For right now, we're just gonna learn that it's there. And these borders will print when you print, whereas these grayed out borders, that the grid lines that we have turned on now, they're not going to print. So if you want them to print, you want to put the border on it. It also helps things stand out, makes things look a little neater, etc. The next tool, let's just say I'm typing in one cell. Well, you can see that I'm not really in one cell. I have some information over here and some information over there. But if I select the two, I can use this tool to merge them. Now I've lost what's in the second one. It's only going to keep what's in the first one. But now, if I type all that information, D and E are no longer two cells. So if I click here, it's the same thing. Now I'm going to jump to F. Fair warning, and you can undo that. You can merge or you can unmerge. In all fairness, I have to say that I kind of avoid merging a lot of times. It can influence your ability to work efficiently with formulas and things like that. Maybe when it's all done, if you need to put a header on it or something, but just know that it's there. Okay, here's some alignment. So if I click on this cell, or if I click on all the cells, I select them all, I can pick a left alignment. Now everything's to the left. Now everything's to the center. Now everything's to the right. Right being not that common in something like Google Docs, but fairly common in Google Sheets, because things like currency, etc. would be aligned to the right. Okay. This is a vertical alignment, so it's always possible for me to change the size. Let me get back to a more reasonable view here. It's always possible for me to change the width or the height of these columns and rows. I can just lay my mouse over the top of the line that divides the two things. So from A to B there's a line. If I click there, I can drag this way out. See, and I can also click that line between 1 and 2 and make it very tall if I needed to for some reason. Now this button here has to do with the vertical alignment. So if I select these two, I can put it at the top of those cells, middle of the cells, or bottom of the cells. So two types of alignment. Now I'm putting it in the center, and I'm using this tool to put it in the middle. So two tools to take care of that. You might not notice this vertical alignment because very often the lines are just tall enough to accept what's in them. But here, let me show you an example. I'm typing, and I'm typing over there. I'm going to click on this cell, and the next tool right over here is called text wrapping. Now by default, the text will display as it did here. I exceeded the boundaries of my cell, so it went past there, but it's showing to me. But if there was anything typed in cell C3, even a space, I'm no longer going to see it. Okay, so if there was any content here, I'm not going to be able to read all my stuff. Now, one way I can handle that is simply by extending the width of this, but I guess you can see that if there were a couple of cells with long content, I'd very quickly run out of visible space on the screen. So there is an alternative, and I'll show you that. Okay, the alternative is that I can use this tool and change my wrapping so that, oops, sorry, on the wrong cell when I did that. Change my wrapping so it now makes enough space vertically, and you can see that's where the vertical alignment comes into play, because it's going to impact the content on either side of my cells. So if I wanted this aligned up and to the right, I could do that, and there we go. Okay. One other form of alignment is right here, this little A at an angle. You can take your text and you can transition it to an angle such as this. This really makes most sense in a header row, and it allows you to, narrow down those rows a little bit to fit more. And you can do that as an angle, but you can also just go straight vertical if you're really looking to save room. And sometimes I think that's, it's not as fancy, but might be a little clearer to your users. Okay, let me double back for a second. The one thing I didn't show you in here under the text wrap tool is this third option. So let me come back. I'm going to delete what's in here. Let me just do that. Okay, so I've deleted what's in there. I'm going to set my wrapping back to the original, where it just extends into the cell. Remember, if anything is typed into this cell, even a space, it cuts off that view. So I'm going to delete that space. So my third option is simply to have it not extend into this area, even if there is nothing preventing it from doing so. So here it is. I haven't lost any content. You can see that it's in there. It's just not showing it to me. So those are the three options there. Okay, a couple of other things you can do. Let me just do this. Notice when I type google.com, it recognized it as a hyperlink, so I can click on there and that will open Google for me in a new tab. But if I didn't do that, if I typed Google, let me open a window here. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. Okay, I can go get this address. I'm going to copy that. I can click on here and I can make that a hyperlink. So now the text is going to display as Google, but the actual link will be in here. And that will function exactly the same as the link above it did. You know, I'll click on it, I'll get this option, I'll click again, and it'll open up Google search for me. So that's how you can put that in there. This tool is to insert comments, so it's the same as the one we looked at here. This is a quick way to do charts and graphs. This is a filter tool that we'll look at in more depth later, and this is where some common formulas are kept, although you can see that there's quite a few of these. Quite a few formulas that you can use, because a spreadsheet is generally used for calculations, not for building boxes and formatting, but for doing math. Okay, the one area we skipped was this, and let me give you a very brief introduction into that. It's just working with your data types, and we're going to do a video right after this one on data types, but just so you know, this is where you can set the parameters of the data types. So there's a 19 in there. If I click the $, it goes to a currency format. If I click it again, if I click the 1, 2, 3, it's going to bring me all my options. I'm just going to go to automatic. It's back to 19. I could have made that as a percentage, and you'll notice that 19 is 1900%. If I had wanted 19%, I'd have two options. I could say 0.19, and then I could convert that to a percentage, and I'd get 19. Or I could take the cells, set them to percentage first, and now when I type in my 19, bang, it's right. So you must set the cell format to percentage before you type in it if you want to be able to type those percentages easily. Otherwise, you're going to have to do them as decimals, which is a little harder, and then convert them later. So I'd recommend the former rather than the latter approach. Okay, just know that these are here. You can add or remove here. I can add how many decimal places. I can remove as many decimal places as I want. And there's a lot more in detail that I can do in here, but this is the basics. These are the basics. Whereas this formatting is dealing more with the text. So under format, you're going to find text, but down here, you're going to be able to work with your data types. Okay, that's a long video. We're going to follow this one up with a shorter one on data types, and hopefully that's a nice introduction into the Google Sheets environment for you.